Okay, so to really dive into and understand the full extent of being lit, getting lit, being turned up, being popping, I think it's important to also understand the opposite of that. And the opposite of that is to be dimly expressive in health. And so, a really kind of quick and easy go-to, because this is where the neuroanatomy becomes difficult, because oftentimes when we have a running narrative in our mind, we think it is our smart part of our mind, right? However, oftentimes, in my opinion, it is the amygdala, the emotional center of our brain. And so the question is, how do we then decipher between, okay, I'm living in a place where that prefrontal cortex is engaged when it needs to be, and the amygdala is engaged when it needs to be. And again, how long does the amygdala need to be turned on for? A moment. And then it gives you energy, you respond, and then the goal is to get switched back into an engaged prefrontal cortex and parasympathetic nervous system. That is, in essence, if I could simplify this entire next hour down, the art form of producing energy, going from high energy amygdala reaction, fight or flight response, to immediately getting into the parasympathetic or prefrontal cortex parasympathetic healing pathway. So stress to strength as quickly as possible. In fact, I ended up with the great honor of being able to interact with one of the leading experts in the world, a professor out of the University of Israel, Yuri Gidtrov is a PhD in neuroimmunology, one of the foremost published people on cancer survival and the vagus nerve and HRV studies. So I was talking to him about the effects of the stress of the pandemic, and with everything that was associated with the masking and inactivity and toxicity, and he got in this thick Israel accent, and he says, if you stop talking about stress, you can get to the main point, which is the parasympathetic nervous system is faster than the fight or flight mechanism, meaning as quickly as someone can go into a reactive state, they can get back into a healthy state. And so this little quick go-to is DIM, DIM. And think of this as a check for your emotional status. Am I feeling deceived? And think about the emotional response when someone lies to you, like how much that just inside feels negative. So am I feeling deceived? You got the amygdala going. You are not in a lit up status. Am I feeling intimidated? And again, same thing. When you're forced to do something based on intimidation, then that is not a lit up status. That is a amygdala status. Or am I being manipulated? And this is a term that has been used often. In fact, in the chiropractic profession, oftentimes, in order to become more scientifically clear, research will say, a chiropractic is a spinal manipulation, but it's actually not a manipulation. A manipulation means that one person is putting a force into another person in order to get them to do what they want. And a chiropractic adjustment is quite the opposite. When we perform a chiropractic adjustment, the goal is to remove interference between the nervous system, between the brain and the body, in order to allow the body to do whatever it needs to do. And so it's a nitpicky thing, but I think it also is an important thing. Am I feeling like this person is getting me to do something that I don't really want to do, and they're doing it in order to benefit themselves? So am I feeling dim? Am I feeling deceived? Am I feeling intimidated? Or am I feeling manipulated? Another kind of a go-to acronym, which is same thing, DIM. Am I feeling depressed? Meaning, am I sad? That's simply the amygdala in a low energy status. And am I feeling insecure? And inconfident? And that's probably the the whole goal of this entire series is by the end of this series that you will feel confident in understanding your health, how to be healthy, and the science that backs up the scripture that those belief systems are accurate, and they ever always have been. That Jesus came here, he showed us how to live, he showed us how to heal each other, and he set the example, and feel secure in that belief system. And then the third is misunderstood. Like when you're talking to somebody and they're just not getting you, or they're perceiving you coming from a different place than where you are. Those are all self checks of, I'm not in a lit up status. I am in an amygdala status. And then again, with that awareness, just aware of that, it's a matter of letting it go and then focusing on the things that we do have control over, which are those different things with the prefrontal cortex that we went over the last thing. So when I jump into this story now, because right now I am in the clinic at Symmetry Oasis in the Dominican Republic. And a year ago, my life was very different. I was the president of multiple nonprofit organizations. I was a main doctor in our clinic in Washington State, in Arlington, Washington, Symmetry Chiropractic. And I found myself in a very dim place. And in that dim place was based on choices I'd made during the pandemic. We from the very beginning of the pandemic took an alternate route, because when the pandemic first kicked off, my understanding was they said this is going to be a virus that is going to be with us, and so we got to just get used to it. So the strategies that were used were not long-term strategies, in my opinion, and that opinion could be proven to be true, since a lot of the strategies have now been disregarded, and even people that were very passionate about it no longer care about those strategies of masking, social distancing, isolation, or whatever, quarantining. And so for us, what we decided, if this is going to be a long-term problem, we need to come up with long-term strategies, which is ensure that we can keep our patients healthy and keep ourselves healthy, not by avoidance, not by being afraid, not by, and I shouldn't say not by being afraid. I was afraid. I was afraid that if I accepted wearing a mask, that would be the standard. Very similar to, there are countries in the Middle East where women wear masks. And so, and the reason for that is it doesn't make sense to me here, but there are reasons that are accepted. So I was afraid that if I started to do something, I would be expected to do it forever. And they were outside of my value system. And my value systems are in line with biblical principles and the example that Jesus left. And that's what I looked to. It was a very uncertain time, but I looked for Jesus' example, and he didn't shy away from sick people. He went and healed them. He didn't put a mask on in order to interact with them. He went and healed them. And he then affirmed people that their faith healed them. And so when I went into that understanding, I based everything around that. And so in Washington State, it wasn't well received, because in Washington State, politically, there is a bias that seemed to align with the mandates. And not to say that people didn't have opinions of their own, but it seemed very highly correlated that whatever opinion was popular in political circles, that became people's healthcare opinion, which was different from mine. And so I was feeling negative about this, and I was openly criticized for my choices. And even though our success stats, we had 100% of our patients, not a single one died from COVID, not a single one was hospitalized, not a single one has any chronic illness. So we succeeded at taking good care of our patients, very different than a lot of the other clinics around our clinic. And yet I found myself in a very dim status, because I felt deceived by my patients. My patients, we had 40% of our patients that discontinued care in our clinic because that we didn't have a mask on. And we had a good amount of patients that wanted to tell me exactly how my belief systems weren't accurate, and that I was a bad human being for having those belief systems. and even the government stepped in after being reported to the governor, and going through multiple investigation processes, and being shown that we had our systems figured out, and we didn't have a single case of spread of COVID within our clinic. So I was feeling very dim because, we had done all the things correctly, yet I experienced a high level of negative feedback, and I felt this negative feedback, and now realizing when I look back on it, it was simply my amygdala just always being in that warrior mode of, I got to protect myself, I got to protect people, I got to protect my values, I got to protect my belief systems, and feeling insecure in my ability to do that since so many other people were not. So here I was. I'm a marathon runner. I qualify for the Boston Marathon now multiple times. I typically get top 10 when I run a marathon finishing, and to look at me, I would have been a picture of health. I run hundreds of miles a month, and yet my blood pressure was through the roof. It had been dangerously high now for years, but where I'm at is I am in a position where I have to put on a happy face, right? I have to be positive. I have a lot of people that rely on me in this situation, being in charge of so many things, but it was getting to the point where it was concerning, right? It was chronically high, and I know the health consequences of having high blood pressure. And I had one of my friends saying, Devin, there's just nothing else you can do. I mean, there's nothing else you can do. You're doing all the things. You're a runner. You eat healthy. You take vitamins that get adjusted regularly. Your regular chiropractic care to release these stress patterns. And it wasn't like I was exhausted. I had a high level of energy, but I was not lit, as we're going to cover in this module. And so and the other thing that was a symptom was like this gripping anxiety. Like that, I'm going to tell you, like, how many times I was just on the floor in my office, it was like legs up, trying to get my anxiety under control, because it literally felt like I was being physically choked. And I even had one of these oxygen monitors, because we monitor our patients for oxygen levels within COVID. And I had strong oxygen. I measured my O2 levels. I could measure my VO2 output, but I had this feeling of being suffocated. So finally, after how many years of mask mandates, and we didn't. It wasn't like we were like, wear masks where we have to. We didn't wear masks. We understood that this was a tool that a lot of people use in order to feel better about the pandemic, but I wasn't willing to do something that would negatively affect my health if I wasn't willing to do it forever. And that was the example I was setting for my kids is, life in the world will change, but our principles guide us. And especially the way that the mandates were put into place, it was very much a dim status of do this or else. And personally, I faced the threat of loss of license, of loss of my clinic, thousands of dollars in fines. Depends how you do the math, maybe quite a bit more than that. And so for me, I took that very seriously, and we didn't travel for 3 years. We didn't take a vacation until the Supreme Court ruled that the mask mandates were not legal for planes. So as soon as that was lifted, our family went to the Dominican Republic for the first time, and this place is just raw. It is a developing nation. Imagine just utter chaos, but everything seems to work. People on motorcycles, driving around, no traffic rules to be at least followed by the majority of people, and this is the way my brain works. My brain is high energy, reacting, at least my brain at the point that I went to the Dominican Republic, and highly reactive. And so we had a dream. We'd had a vision that has been almost 6-7 years in the making of having an international healing facility, and not just a place to vacation to, but a place where people could go, connect with other human beings that are important to them, become better, and then go back into the world to serve. And so as we're here, Chelsea, I knew within 3 days that this is going to be this is our place. This is the country. And so on the third day, we ended up getting a hold of a real estate agent, and then we took this journey to this property. And our real estate agent said, I told her our vision, and she goes, I have the place for you. And so we come to what now is Symmetry Oasis. It's 47 acres. It's a mountain, and we drive up this mile-long driveway. And again, I may reference this multiple times in this module or in this course series, that if you can put your mind into watching Jurassic Park, this country is what inspired that movie. It is that. I mean, as you're driving the driveway, I just, in my mind, I just hear this song, no, 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 driving through jungle canopies. And then we come up, and the first stop is a mandala labyrinth on this long driveway. So we stop, we get out, and it was the first time that I got out of the car and I could take a breath in. I mean, the first time my lungs felt the ability to be able to relax and then breathe out fully. And so I knew, without knowing, that there was something very, very special about this place. And so we spent 2 hours at the property. My wife and kids and our friends that were with us went on a tour, and I just went with the GoPro in hand. I was recording every ounce of this place that I could, in order to then start to vision what God could use this place for. And so we ended up, a month later, I was going to a mission trip in Haiti in order to then provide free chiropractic care to thousands of people with a group of 84 other chiropractors. And I with the real estate agent in the company that we dealt with, we said, hey, listen, this place is invaluable. I mean, it is so special. It was owned by missionaries and their family, and they had a missionary retreat center here and training facility here, and tragically died of cancer right before COVID, or in the beginning of COVID. And so it's worth far more than what we got it for. But we said, hey, this is all the money we have, and this isn't a negotiation strategy. I can be back there in a month, in order that I'm going to this mission trip. And literally, I flew in on March 24th, 2023, my birthday, and signed legal papers to finalize the sale of this, investing all of our money into it. And so went on the mission trip, and then we moved our entire family back here in June. And the reason for this very, very long story, and I do apologize for my lack of precision, it is that the reason we bought this property was for one sole reason, was to understand what and why I could be the healthiest person in the world, but I was stuck in this neuro-emotional fog. And as soon as we stepped on the property, it immediately cleared. So my mission, my goal, was to understand this process of being able to clear this neuro-emotional fog, connect back with God, in order to then convert that dim status back into a status of being light. And so, if you could, again, without too much activation of the amygdala, think of your own status and what level of dimness are you. And to make it funny, right? I had to make it funny because that's the thing. It's I have researched quite a bit on negating the effect of cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone that happens when we have a emotional response that is negative. And there's 3 ways of immediately clearing cortisol. Way number 1 is exercise, which we've already talked about. The tremendous benefits. Everyone knows that. Again, sometimes it's difficult to immediately just, I'm going to go work out. And maybe we can change that. Maybe we can create a culture where it's actually not, where getting movement into our body is the normal. So exercise neutralizes cortisol. Way number 2 is crying. Crying immediately decreases cortisol. And is this an exclusive list? No, there's lots of things that decrease cortisol. I'm just going to talk about the main 3 that I'm aware of. So crying immediately decreases cortisol. And this is the thing that's interesting, because I believe, based on my observation and general consensus, is that women are more likely to cry than men. And what do men say? Oh, it's because they're just emotional. Is that they're emotional, or is it they're better at processing cortisol efficiently? I think there's more data to support the latter. And number 3 is laughing. Okay, so laughing is immediately, so it neutralizes cortisol. And I almost got to a point where I had so much cortisol, and I had a point where I was so frustrated often, with the management of the pandemic, and now suffering the consequences of it, that I would just laugh like a crazy person, right? And maybe that's because I am a crazy person, but I can also acknowledge the fact that being a man that has a difficult time crying, that was a good cortisol release. So dim. What if we just turn it into a joke, right? Of if someone is in a status where they're feeling deceived or intimidated or manipulated, that we can just say that they're just being a dimwit, right? Could that catch on? Could that be a thing? Because rather than taking it personal, oh gosh, how dare you insult my intelligence? Again, if you are in a amygdala activated status, you are not operating at a prefrontal cortex. You are functioning much slower than what you have the ability to. In essence, dim-witted, or being a dimwit. So we'll see how this recording goes. I may reference being a dimwit now multiple times, and that is not meant to be negative towards any human being, or to refer that someone is dumb, just to acknowledge a status. And some people may say, yeah, well, gosh, that I was deceived, right? Oh, I was intimidated, I was manipulated. Yeah, you may have been, and that already happened. Our goal now is to, with the understanding that we got from the last module system, engage that prefrontal cortex in order to convert the stress into strength. So rather than being someone that is deceived, be someone that has a prefrontal cortex that is so fast that it cannot be tricked. Someone that is so strong that they cannot be intimidated or feel insecure. And have someone so confident and so Christ-like that they cannot be manipulated, because when God is pumping through us, through God, all things are better. So even what some may call a spinal manipulation, which the literature shows that when someone, say like a physical therapist or a medical doctor, and even a DO, performs a spinal manipulation, they do not receive the health benefits. When a chiropractor does a chiropractic adjustment by putting a force into a stuck vertebra, clearing interference, there is a health benefit, because the intention is what matters.